Hey guys, and thanks for coming back and joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Glad to have you back. So today's episode, I really enjoyed putting this episode together. Today's episode is about how reliable is eyewitness testimony. So it's one of those things that when you hear about eyewitness testimony, it appears to be very damning. Like this person saw this with their own eyes. They're here telling us about it. It's got to be accurate. I mean, they wouldn't lie about that. They have to be relaying what they saw. Super interesting. So let's dive into it because it's not nearly as accurate as we've given it merit to be. So, eyewitness testimony is historically among the most convincing forms of evidence in criminal trials. Probably only a signed confession by a suspect can further convince a jury about that individual's guilt. So, like when you have eyewitness testimony, it is difficult to overcome eyewitness testimony. You think about it in a movie or a TV show or in a book where the witness points at the defendant and said, "That's the person that I saw do this. I saw them with my own eyes," etc., etc. So it's not hard to understand why it's so convincing and why we place so much weight and merit on it. We trust our own perceptions and experiences. We know in our own mind that if we say we saw something, we saw it. We know what we saw. You're not my eyes aren't lying to me. I know exactly what I saw. Now, in many instances, that's true, right? Like if you think about politics, I would tell you to trust your eyeballs much more than what anybody else tells you. Like if it doesn't pass the eyeball test, it's not true. Vice President Harris made a trip to the border trying to say that she was tough on crime. Sorry, I got video of you protesting deportation. I've got video of you trying to raise money for people that rioted in Minnesota during the George Floyd riots. So, no, you're not tough on crime. And you're not even tough on the border. Millions of people poured in while you and Joe Biden sat and did nothing. So we saw it. You can say whatever you want now. And maybe your position has changed, but you better explain to me why it's changed and what specifically you plan to do differently. Because short of that, I'm going to go with the 3.5 years or more than 3.5 years, really, when you talk about how far back we're referencing. I'm going to go with the last 10, 15 years of what I've seen you do to make my decision on how I think you're going to react on securing our border. So we trust our own perception and experience for sure. You know, I'll believe it when I see it. That's not a cliche. That's how we think about things. If we see it with our own eyes, that's very convincing to us. So to see someone sit on a witness stand and point at someone else and say, "That's the person I saw do X, Y, or Z," it's powerful. It's very powerful. With that said, being convincing and being powerful isn't the same as being accurate. Those are two very different things. And eyewitness testimony is much more fallible than most people think it is. And so, you know, we now have ways to prove that, to show that. And a lot of that relates to the scientific advances that were made in DNA. You know, when you think about the late 80s and early 90s, most of us that watched the O.J. Simpson trial were like, dude, this guy's DNA is all over the place. Their DNA, Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson's DNA is in his car. It's in his bedroom. Like, come on, man. Like this, there's no way that this guy didn't do this. Well, we got off. But the thing that allowed us to do is it allowed us to be much more precise about figuring out who did what and who was where. Because you can't fake DNA and you can't explain away that, oh, it must have been somebody else. No, DNA is super specific to a person. We can test it and we can tie it back to you with a piece of your hair, with a little bit of saliva, a couple of skin cells. So that allowed us to go back and look at previously settled cases where someone had been convicted of a crime, a lot of times rapes and murders, very violent, serious crimes. There's a group called the Innocence Project, and they've done just that. And they have freed or exonerated 358 people who were sentenced to death previously and used DNA evidence to prove beyond doubt that they were not the perpetrator of the crime that they were convicted of. So these are 358 people sitting on death row, and this is since 1989. So 358 people that were convicted since 1989, sitting on death row that were exonerated through DNA evidence. So Why is that important to eyewitness testimony? Because we're not talking about DNA, we're talking about eyewitness testimony. Of those 358 people, 71% of them had been convicted through eyewitness misidentification. They had served an average of 14 years in prison before exoneration. So think about that. 71% of 358 people had served an average of 14 years in prison for crimes they did not commit because someone had misidentified them as the perpetrator. That's wild. Of those false identifications, 41% involved cross-racial misidentifications. So 221 of those 358 people on death row were African American. So 41% involved cross-racial misidentifications, meaning white person identified black person, Asian person identified Hispanic person, whatever the case may be. But that's a lot, like 41% across racial, and 71% of these cases had happened, or the convictions had happened because of eyewitness testimony. That's crazy when you think about it. That's a lot of people that got it wrong, that had a serious impact on these people's lives. Even crazier maybe, and this isn't the subject for this episode, but 28% of those cases involved a false confession. So 28% of those people sitting on death row had confessed to crimes they did not commit. They knew they didn't commit them. They weren't there. And that leads you to think about how do police interrogations work, and how are they getting these confessions out of innocent people? They've been proven innocent by DNA evidence. So it's pretty crazy. So, we can test it now. We can test to see how accurate eyewitness testimony is. And it's not nearly as accurate as we'd like to think that it is. So why is that? So why is it challenging? We think that when you see a memory, it's like a video camera, like your mind is taking a video of what you're seeing, and it's straightforward, it's fact-based, it's not influenced by your emotions. That's false. That's just absolutely false. We're biased in our own minds to exaggerate some experiences and to minimize and overlook others. In a previous episode, I talked about, I took a test, or took a class, an online class, on kind of understanding people's behavior and what drives people to do the things that they do. And so there was this test where both my wife and I took it at the same time. It was 5 people. They were all dressed in black. They were holding an iPad right here. They were in a nondescript room, so there wasn't anything to distract you. And these people slowly, about this fast, moved the iPads up and down. And the test was, we're going to change, they're just going to put a random color up on the screen. So blue, green, red, yellow. And your job was to tell you how many times on any screen you saw the color red. And so they give you a minute and they go through it. Both my wife and I took it, and they said, stop. And I said to my wife, how many did you count? And she said 29. And she said, how many did you count? I said 62. And it was actually 63. So there was 63. I missed one of them somewhere, but she missed over half of them. And then the guy says, so how many of you noticed me dancing around behind those people with the iPads in a bumblebee costume? And I'm like, what's she talking about? I said, what's he talking about? And my wife said, how could you miss him? He was back there jumping all around. So that's a very good example of eyewitness testimony being very unreliable, because we both saw exactly the same thing, and we both noticed 2 very different things, and the details on what we watched it with our own eyes. And this was not a pressure situation, not a dangerous situation, not an important situation. And look at the discrepancies that we came out of that particular instance with. That should tell you that eyewitness testimony isn't nearly as reliable as we think it is. And we should consider that when we're factoring that into our decision-making process and kind of walking through how people think about eyewitness testimony. So what are some reasons? Why do we put faith in that? What are some reasons why we put so much faith in eyewitness testimony? So first, like, it's popular. When you think about all the media and books and different things, that we read, the people that they have highly detailed, very accurate memories, the witnesses in these books, in these stories, in these movies, in these TV shows. Like, and it's a video in those TV shows. We can see exactly what happened. Like, we see it with our own eyes as well. And we can see when the people are recounting that accurately. So in our minds, well, why doesn't real life work exactly the same way TVs and movies do? Well, I think we all know the answer to that. But in this particular instance, I think we've been conditioned to think that eyewitness testimony is super, super reliable and super, super accurate. And that's just not the case. Second, crimes, accidents, they're unusual, they're distinctive, they're stressful, they can be terrifying, they can scare the hell out of you. If you're at a shooting and you're worried about getting shot, your emotions are going to be off the chart, rightfully, by the way. But that's also going to impact what you see and how you think about what you see. We think that because it's such an important event, that you should notice and recount every detail very distinctly and very accurately. But the problem is stress and fear can actually inhibit memory formation. And the memory continues to be constructed as you replay what just happened to you over and over in your mind. And your mind creates a narrative, and the narrative creates memories, and the memories create visions. And you can talk yourself into seeing or thinking something that didn't happen. I can tell you, I used to umpire baseball, and I was dispassionate. I was, I didn't care about who won or who lost. I just wanted to get the calls right. And there were so many times when I would make a call and someone was clearly safe or clearly out, or a ball was clearly fair or clearly foul. And the people on the side that the call that went against, they wanted the call to be different so badly, they literally saw it differently than what actually happened. So your emotions absolutely impact your memory formation, the accuracy of your memory formation, and your ability to discern what you actually saw. So it's very important to keep in mind when you're considering eyewitness testimony. I saw it with my own eyes. Well, maybe you saw something with your own eyes, but I'm not so sure that what you just talked about is the truth. It's probably the truth to them. They're not lying, but they've come up with an alternate memory, or their mind has created a memory different than the reality that they actually saw. Third, eyewitness testimony is generally from confident people. It's rare that someone gets up and says, I'm not really sure, but it might have been him. Usually, if you have someone on the stand do an eyewitness testimony, they're going to be confident, they're going to be sincere, and it's going to make you believe them. Because why would they come and lie about this? Why would they come and not tell the truth? Well, it is the truth in their mind. The whole point is it might not be accurate. And that's something that's very important to keep in mind. And it's very difficult. You've got an accused person who's saying, it wasn't me, it was the one-armed man. And the other person says, no, they had two arms. Come to find out it was the one-armed man. But it's because they're so sincere and because they're confident typically when they give this testimony, it's very easy to believe them. And lastly, confirmation bias. So, confirmation bias is super evident in politics. So if you're a Kamala Harris fan, anything Trump does is bad, and you're going to overlook the faults that exist on the Harrison Walls side. And if you're a Donald Trump fan, you're going to overlook the faults that exist on the Trump-Vance side, and you're going to only see the negatives on the Harris Walls side. So, the confirmation bias is very, very real, and it plays a part in how we form our memories. It plays a part in what we see and how we process what we see. So this is no different than if you played a video for people. It's funny, I saw a video of an attorney that was talking to a class of law students. And he was saying why he suggests you never, ever talk to police. And so he gives an example, and he says, there were 3 people killed and 2 of them were injured, and it happened at this place, and we've got a suspect in custody. And then he says, how many people were shot? And I answered 3. And he said, no, I never said anyone was shot. Go back and replay it. And sure as hell, he replays it. He said 3 people were killed. I filled in my memory when he used the term how many people were shot. My memory filled in that he had said previously how many people were shot, when he very clearly said how many people were killed. So there's confirmation bias. I wanted to confirm what he said, and so in my mind I melded those two things together. And that's one of the reasons why eyewitness testimony can be so compelling, is that they want to help they want to do the right thing. Now, not all eyewitness testimony is wrong either. There is quite a bit of validity to eyewitness testimony. The whole point here is it's not infallible. It is not the ironclad proof that we've held it up to be over the years. And I think it's important to remember. So the reality is memory doesn't record our experiences like a video camera. It creates stories based on those experiences. The stories are sometimes very, very accurate. Sometimes they're completely fictional. How many times have you heard someone say, this happened to me, and we've got video of it? Well, it never happened to them. In their mind, they probably think, I shouldn't say probably, in their mind, they could very well think that what they just told you is the truth. They could have that memory in their head. The truth probably lies somewhere in between 100% accurate, and 100% made up. But it can change depending on the situation, depending on the emotions, depending on several factors. So memory isn't the ironclad proof that we think that it is. Eyewitness testimony is useful. I'd rather have I'd rather have a few people that saw an event and tell us what they saw than just have to rely on one side versus the other side. It's good to have third parties that can see that. But it's important to remember that it's subject to unconscious memory distortions and biases, even among the most confident witnesses, even among the most sincere witnesses. Even when it feels very, very cut and dried, you don't know for sure that what that person is conveying to you is actually what happened or just their version, their very real, truthful version of what happened. So it's very, very challenging. I would definitely rely on DNA much more than I would rely on eyewitness testimony. And I'm glad that we've made the scientific advances that we've made to try to make sure that the right people are held accountable for bad actions when they do take place. So hope you found that episode interesting. I love putting it together. I found it very interesting. It makes me think very differently when I hear someone give a version of their story. That's exactly how I think about it now, is this is a version of a story. It's a version of what they saw. It very well could be the truth. It's probably what they think is the truth, but does all of the other evidence, circumstantial or not, fit with the version of events I just heard this person tell me about? And if not, I would trust the physical evidence much more than I would trust the eyewitness testimony. So thanks again, guys, for coming back and checking us out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on our videos on whatever platform you consume our content on. And don't forget to head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. Links to our other social media content is there. We've also got a daily newsletter that we publish, and we'd love for you to sign up for that so we can send it to your email and we can keep you up to date on the news that's happening every week. So thanks a lot for coming back, guys. Really appreciate you having you on the channel. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next time.